Welcome, friends. My name is Coach Lucas. Today we are going to be talking about an introduction to macronutrients. Of course, gotta represent Tampa Bay. It's where we're based out of. Got Tom Brady on the shirt. So if you're a fan, awesome. But yeah, so in today's lecture, we're going to be discussing again the intro to macronutrients. There's a variety of topics that I'm going to go into a little bit in depth. So make sure if you want to actually learn and digest this information, you may want to get a pen and pencil or a piece of paper, something that you could write down, something that you could take notes. If you're on a computer, that's completely fine too, but pen and pencil, piece of paper, make sure that you're actually taking everything in because this is vital information you can learn for the rest of your life. So some of the topics that we're going to be discussing within macronutrients. Number one, what are macronutrients, right? Very, very important. We're going to be talking about the role of protein when it comes to building muscle, what carbohydrates are good for, what fats are good for. And again, these are kind of like your actual macronutrients, your proteins, your carbohydrates, your fats. We'll be discussing caloric balance and macronutrient ratios. We'll be discussing how micronutrients and fiber, how they play a specific and vital role as far as overall health and performance. We'll be discussing a little bit of hydration, how supplements and macronutrients go hand in hand, how to adapt your macronutrients to your training goals. We'll be discussing meal timing and frequency, how to track and monitor your macronutrients, and we'll cover a little bit some common myths and misconceptions when it comes to macronutrients within building muscle and nutrition. So let's start off with the first topic, which is going to be, what are macronutrients? So essentially, macronutrients, they are the nutrients that provide energy and make up the bulk of your caloric needs. So the three primary macronutrients, you have proteins, which when it comes to a caloric intake, calories are basically a source of energy. So think about energy in, energy out, kind of like gas, right? If you think about a vehicle and gas, you have a certain amount of gallons that your fuel tank can hold, and you're expending that energy, aka those gallons of fuel, when you're driving your car. There's different qualities of gas, aka different qualities of food that you can put into your body. For your higher performing vehicles, aka bodies that are actually doing a lot of activity, you're gonna want the higher quality fuel, aka your gas. You want higher quality energy. And when it comes to expenditure, because you are going to be expending a lot, the certain balance that you have, the energy balance that you have, is going to affect your body composition, specifically the macronutrients and that ratio of proteins to carbs to fats. That will affect your body composition as well. When it comes to calories, again, those are units of energy. 1 gram of protein provides 4 calories of energy. So again, 1 gram of protein equals 4 calories. They're essential for building and repairing tissues, including muscles, skin, organs, things of that nature. When it comes to carbohydrates, just like protein, are an energy source. They're all energy sources, but carbohydrates are an equal ratio of calories per gram. So just how protein is 1 gram equals 4 calories, carbohydrates are the same. 1 gram of carbs equals 4 calories. Carbs are the body's primary source of energy. So, especially when you're in a high intensity activity like running, sprinting, boxing, anything that requires a lot of energy, especially short bursts, carbohydrates are going to be the primary source of fuel. And then we have fats. So fats are a little bit different. Fats carry more energy per gram. So instead of like protein and carbs carrying 4 calories per single gram, fats actually carry 9 calories per gram. Fats are crucial for energy storage, hormone production, and the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins. So you do need fats, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So basically, again, those are the initial carbohydrates, or those are the initial macros. You have your proteins, your carbs, and your fats. Now let's talk about the role of protein within muscle building, right? So protein provides the building blocks, AKA the amino acids, necessary for muscle growth and repair. So when you're engaging in resistance training, you know, there's a lot of things happening. The old thought was that you're having muscle breakdown, and part of that's kind of true. Essentially, when you're gaining muscle through mechanical tension, which, you know, we have some information out there. We have some videos out there that kind of discuss what mechanical tension is. Basically, you need to help to repair the muscle, right? There is a little bit of damage going on. You have your calcium ion role playing, accumulation of calcium ions, actually signaling muscle protein synthesis, which is, again, it's basically the body saying, hey, it's time to use this protein to synthesize more muscle growth, more repair. So basically, the muscle protein synthesis is the rebuilding of those protein fibers. You're adding on contractile fibers. When you contract, like when you're squeezing a muscle, that's contractile tissue, and you're adding on more of that when you're actually growing your muscle. So different sources of protein, there are quite a few. Of course, the different proteins carry a different level of bioavailability. So what's actually available to be broken down. Foods like eggs are extremely bioavailable, meaning you're absorbing almost all of the food and using the protein that it actually contains. Whey protein is pretty much the top. You're getting almost 100% bioavailability. So for all my carnivores out there, or omnivores, people who pretty much eat everything, lean meats are gonna be really, really good as far as what types of proteins that you're looking for. So you have your chicken, your turkey, your lean beef, fish, eggs, dairy. These are really rich sources of high quality protein, and really they contain pretty much all of the essential amino acids. Now, if you are one of my plant-based friends, there's still options. Plant-based proteins aren't quite as bioavailable, so usually you're gonna need a little bit more as far as the intake to get the same result as somebody who's eating mainly animal protein, but that's okay. So, you have your legumes, you have your beans, lentils, tofu, tempeh, quinoa. There's certain grains like amaranth. These can provide good quality sources of protein for vegans and vegetarians. Now, when it comes to your recommended protein intake, studies show, there's a lot of different factors that are going to come into play, such as your age, your body weight, your height, your activity level. On a general guideline, though, most recommendations are saying between 1.2 up to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. If you're taking the higher end, 2.2 grams per kilogram equals, for us Americans out there who use the imperial system, not the metric, 2.2 kilograms per gram, or a gram per 2.2 kilograms equals out to about 1 gram per pound. So unless you are pretty overweight, which that's okay, we're gonna work on that. Typically you wanna aim for about a gram per pound of body weight that you carry. A lot of studies have shown, especially if you're in a gaining phase where you're using a little more carbohydrates to kind of fuel that extra source. In a gaining phase, you can use about 0.8. So basically you multiply your body weight times 0.8. That'll kind of give you about a minimum that you want to need for protein. You can go up to 1 gram per pound. If you're in a deficit, some people even go up to 1.25, 1.5 grams per pound. And again, different reasons for this. If you're gaining, of course, you don't need as much protein because you have other macronutrients to help you out. But if you're in a deficit, you're wanting to preserve the muscle. The muscle breakdown is real. The body will typically use muscle as a primary energy source when you're in a deficit, and you don't want to lose all that hard earned muscle that you have on the body. So Protein sparing is why you would increase your protein in a deficit. There's a couple of things that come into play when it comes to the timing of protein consumption. So consuming protein before a workout has a lot of benefits. It gives you amino acids for energy. It reduces the muscle breakdown during your exercise. So you're able to actually feel yourself better and you're not going catabolic. You're not starting to break down the muscle. You're staying anabolic in a muscle building state. Post-workout, it's essential to consume protein within a few hours post-workout because you want to maximize your protein synthesis. You want to signal your body saying, hey, it's time for us to grow. You know, it's time for us to recover. And typically, because of its rapid absorption, whey protein is going to be the go-to. So this is why when you're in the gym, you see these big guys, these jacked ladies, you know, super toned, they're consuming their whey protein post-workouts because they want to get that building process started immediately. That way your body is in a constant state of building and repair. Let's talk about topic number 3, carbohydrates for energy. So as I mentioned earlier, the carbohydrates are the body's primary source of energy, especially when you're doing high intensity activities. You know, there's a few variances. There's complex carbs, simple carbs, and then we can also talk a little bit about carb cycling. So when it comes to complex carbs and simple carbs, one moment while I get back in my notes. So complex carbs are going to be more of your slower digesting carbs. These are seen in foods such as sweet potatoes, regular potatoes. They're somewhere between simple and complex. Your rice, things of that nature. Minimal processed. The reason why they're called complex carbs is because it takes a little bit more time to break these down. It doesn't provide such a high insulin spike, which insulin is very key as a driver of pulling protein into the muscles. Typically complex carbs are going to give you that sustained energy throughout the day, just like oatmeal is a complex carb. But if you're looking for simple carbs, these are foods or sources of energy that give you that protein spike. These are absorbed immediately, they raise your blood sugar, and they have their good uses. Things like fruits. Fruits are simple carbs, fruit juices, things that have more of a sugar underneath them, an underlayer of sugar. Those are going to increase your insulin levels rapidly. The reason why you would want these in, and if you ever looked at a bodybuilding style diet, an eating habit of where you're actually trying to gain muscle, when it comes to shuttling protein in, you want to be able to pull the protein into your muscles pretty quickly. So that's when you would use those simple carbs. Before and after a workout, you're having carbs on tap for energy, and that's your before workout. So simple carbs before are an excellent option, especially if you're doing them or consuming them right before a workout, within about an hour to 2 hours. Post-workout, because you want to start signaling that protein synthesis and you want to pull the protein directly into the muscle, simple carbs are great post-workout as well. If you are consuming carbs for the remainder of the day, whether it's morning or evening, complex carbs are probably going to be the better option in those times. But usually and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but typically you'd want to have proteins and fats towards the beginning and the end of the day. They're a little bit slower digesting, they'll keep you full for longer, and the chances of you storing them is, because you're not raising that insulin so high, the chances of you storing that food as body fat is lower. So when it comes to carb cycling, typically this is a strategy that involves alternating high, medium, and low carb days. You're just manipulating your insulin levels, and ultimately you're optimizing your fat loss while preserving muscle. It's a great strategy to use, especially once you have your nutrition already kind of dialed in. But ultimately, this is something a little more advanced. It does work very, very well though to keep a fullness. That way you have energy for your workouts, but you're not overloading your body to where you're starting to store body fats. Some people use strategies such as intermittent fasting. This is keeping your feeding window, your eating window within a certain amount of hours. That way your body kind of has a chance to empty itself out. And you're not overeating. You're only having a certain gap of time that you're supposed to be eating on intermittent fasting. And this helps to regulate the amount of calories that you're actually bringing into your body. Typically, most people would see maybe like an 8-hour feeding window, right? So 1, 2, 3 meals, whatever, within an 8-hour window, and the other 16 hours of the day, you were fasting, you were not eating. So let's see what else. That's section 2. I hope all this is making sense so far. Let's talk about section 3, which is, oh, that was section 3, carbohydrates. Section 4 is going to be the role of fats in hormone regulation. So your body definitely needs to have pretty standard hormone regulation. You don't want anything to go too high or too low. That can cause some health detriment. And fats aid in this. They also aid in cognition. So it is essential to have your minimal level of fats. Now, when we're calculating our macros, typically we're looking at about, just a general rule of thumb, most people, you can take your body weight, multiply it by 0.3, and that'll give you a good idea of how many fats you should take. For most people, that's gonna be at least 45 to 50 grams of fat per day. Some people can afford a little more depending on your goals and depending on where you're starting from as well. But usually 0.3 up to 0.5 times your body weight will give you the range of fat that you're looking for. There isn't a whole lot to say about fats except for that they are necessary. And typically you might not have to add in extra fats, especially if you're consuming animal protein, because animal protein, while it is a high protein item, or while they're high protein items, they do contain fats. You do want to stay away from saturated fats. You know, unsaturated fats are going to be a little bit better. Stay away from trans fats because they're going to be a contributing factor to clogged arteries later on down the road. They're going to be contributing to lower liver function. Ultimately, trans fats are no good. But good healthy fats, such as like olive oil is really good, or avocados, people love avocados, whole eggs, some fats from dairies, those are perfectly fine to consume, especially you have certain foods like your nuts, your seeds, those are gonna be good essential fats as well. Let's move on to the next topic, which will be section number 5. So we have the concept of calorie balance, right? Calories in versus calories out. The proper macronutrients for your individual goals, whether you're bulking, trying to gain muscle, whether you're cutting, trying to reduce body fat, or you're in a maintenance phase, and the role of macronutrient tracking and meal planning. So again, calories, units of energy, right? This is general physics. You cannot beat physics. So what it says is, if you are consuming more than you expend, you're taking in more food than you use, you are going to gain mass. How much of it will be muscle? How much of it is body fat? That depends on your macronutrient ratio, your proteins, the carbs, the fats, and also depends on how far over your maintenance level you are. So with maintenance is essentially the amount of calories you can consume on a daily basis and maintain exactly where you are. Whenever you're getting into a new phase of bulking or cutting, typically you always want to start with a maintenance. You want to see what your maintenance level is. I recommend having a food diary, tracking how much you're taking in on a weekly basis. You know, do of course day by day, but see what your weekly average is and how your body weight fluctuates. If your body weight is staying the same, chances are that's your maintenance level of calories, and then we can adjust from there. So in a bulking phase, typically you want to go a little bit over and start dialing it up gradually to make sure that you're not gaining too much body fat. But you do want to be in an energy surplus. You want to have more food than you're expending. So what that looks like is usually for most people about 10% or more than your maintenance, maybe 15%. For most people, that's about 250 to 400, almost up to 500 calories over your maintenance. That'll give you a good range to where you're able to gain tissue, with the majority of it being muscle, and not gain too much body fat. When it comes to cutting though, that is a different story. So you can do the slow, gradual way. For most people, that's gonna be about 10, maybe 15%. But the issue with that is, you know, it's harder to stick to. If you want those immediate results, for most people, you're gonna go about 20, maybe up to 25% of calories reduced from your maintenance. For most people, that's about a 500 calorie deficit. You're eating 500 calories less than your daily maintenance. And over a 7-day period, a week, that'll equal 3,500 calories lower than your maintenance, which equals a pound of fat lost. So that's the general rule of thumb. It's usually for about 400 or 500 calories for most people. But again, if you want to see a fairly aggressive fat loss stage, the general recommendation is about 20% lower than your maintenance. Yeah, super important. The macronutrient ratios, again, we cover fats. Typically, you multiply body weight times 0.3 to get your fats. Protein, if you want to be safe, especially if you're in a deficit, aim for about 1 gram per pound. And then again, remember that 1 gram of protein equals 4 calories. 1 gram of fat equals 9 calories. So you do the math between both of those. You see what your macronutrients would be. Then you multiply the amount of protein you need by 4. That gives you the amount of calories you're eating that comes from protein. You take the amount of grams of fat you need to be consuming, multiply that by 9. That gives you the amount of calories you're eating from fat. And then whatever's left over on your overall number will give you the amount of carbs typically that you should be eating. And that's an easy way, right? So let's say for number purposes, I am a 200-pound guy. I'm trying to lose a little bit of weight. I'll multiply my body weight 200 times 4, and that will give me 800 calories of protein that I need to be consuming. My fat, 200 times 0.3, I'm not sure what that is, but whatever that is, you get that number, and that gives you your grams of fat. Multiply that by 9, that gives you the amount of calories, and then you have whatever number is left over, right? You calculated your maintenance, you subtracted maybe 500 from that, and whatever that number is, you take that number and you subtract the amount of proteins and fats that you just added up. And what that does is it gives you a number, you divide that by 4, and that is the amount of carbohydrates that you need. So it's a super easy way to check in on that. The best way to be accurate is by having a tracker, right? A lot of people like to use apps. They're great, especially for tracking. So MyFitnessPal is one of the common ones that we use. Also, there's an app called Fat Secret. It's really good. Overall, if you're a little more old school and you like to have a food journal, that is perfectly fine. Whatever way allows you to be accountable for the things that you're consuming, whether it's foods or liquids, anything that you're putting into your mouth, you want to be able to track and see how it's affecting your body. Now, speaking of liquids, we're going to go to the next section, hydration. Hydration is key. Hydration affects your performance in a major way. So with hydration, water, typically you also want to have sort of balance of electrolytes. Salt is a great way to make sure that you are staying hydrated. I know a lot of people used to stray away from salt, but salt is amazing, right? You want to make sure that you have some. Typically pre-workout, I consume 1 to 2 teaspoons of salt just to make sure I stay hydrated and full, and I'll consume about the same afterwards. You can salt your food, salt them lightly for taste, and you'll be okay, especially if you're sweating throughout the day and you're a fairly active person. Hydration does affect your performance in your recovery. If you are dehydrated, the muscles will not have the amount of energy that they need to constantly have the output that you're demanding on them. You are likely to catch cramps, which are not good. You're throwing off your potassium ion channels, which are disrupting your recovery. Overall, it leads to a cascade of negative health effects. So most importantly, stay hydrated. If you need to have like a water jug or something where you can keep track of your hydration throughout the day, it's definitely recommended. Yeah, so that's a good tip for staying hydrated. Again, try to track your hydration. If you have a certain amount of bottles or a certain amount of times you refill a container or a jug, keep that pretty consistent. I know a gallon a day is a lot for most people, but typically, you know, if you're getting over about 94 ounces a day, you're in a good range. And as you get further in a deficit, or if you're very active, you have an active job, such as like a server or a carpenter, or you're out in a hot climate where you're sweating, you would want to consume a bit more. That's it for hydration. We'll breeze quickly past that. Now, supplements and macronutrients. A lot of supplements that are used, like protein powder, creatine, multivitamins, those are excellent. Remember, they are supplements. They aid in whatever you're already doing. They can complement your macronutrient intake, specifically supplements like whey protein and casein. If you are down on your protein, because for a lot of people it is difficult to physically eat the amount of protein that they need, especially if you're not used to it, supplements can help. You know, a standard scoop of most whey proteins is about 25 grams of protein per scoop. Same for your casein. So if you're having, 2 scoops of whey in a day, that's an extra 50 grams. It does go a long way. Something to keep in mind if you need help, but ultimately try to eat it through your food. If you need something in addition, supplements can definitely help. Of course, make sure that whenever you're taking on a new supplement, it is a good idea, a good recommendation to consult with your healthcare provider before doing so to make sure that you are safe to do so. Enough of that. We'll make these next few really, really quick. As far as adapting macronutrients to your training goals, we kind of covered that. Your protein at a minimum should be about 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. If you're getting into a bulking phase where you're increasing calories, that protein really won't change, but usually the carbs will go up. The fats, you can manipulate a little bit. Really, those two are almost interchangeable as long as you're hitting your calories that you need. But for most people, it's easier to increase the carbs, and it's not gonna have such a fulfilling effect as increasing the fats, and it'll give you a little more energy to crush your workouts to gain that muscle mass. When you're cutting though, again, it's because the fats have a minimal essential need, and the protein need to be muscle sparing. Within that muscle sparing, you're gonna make sure that typically the nutrient that is manipulated most, whether bulking or cutting, is gonna be carbs. Typically you'll increase your carbs, decrease your carbs, protein stays pretty much the same no matter what you're doing, unless you're in a deep deficit, which you'll need more protein. That's on that. Meal timing and frequency. So meal timing, you want to optimize your macronutrient utilization. So as I mentioned earlier, typically you want to consume carbs surrounding physical bouts of activity, before a workout, after a workout. What's your best times for carbs? In the mornings and before bed, typically you want to have your proteins and fats. It's because they're slower digesting, you're not going to cause those insulin spikes that you don't need during those times. It's just a good idea. When it comes to meal frequency, most people thrive off of between 4 to 6 meals when it comes to optimizing your body composition. 4 to 6 meals a day. You can have 3 meals and a snack. Whatever the case is, just try to make sure that you're consistent on a day-to-day basis, the timing of your meals. You don't want to have breakfast at 7 a.m. one day and then wait till like 1 p.m. the next day and constantly go back and forth. As much consistency as you can, and then trying to space the meals out, usually every 3 to 4 hours will do the job. Super simple when it comes to that. There's really not much to say. Just try to be consistent, Also, micronutrients. Definitely multivitamins are good to aid. Vegetables and fruits are gonna kind of be the foods that you're looking for to cover those micronutrients. Imagine you have a glass, a jug, and I put rocks in it and I say, is it full? Most people say yes. But then I pour in some sand. Is that full? Okay, yes. Then I pour in some water, You want to get the most amount of quality in to make sure that everything is running synergistically. So that means your macronutrients, your proteins, your carbs, and your fats, but also your micronutrients to help absorption, to help with your gut health. If your gut health is not good, you will not be absorbing the majority of what you could be absorbing, and basically you're almost wasting money on the foods that and supplements you're consuming. If you're not able to absorb them, you're just passing them through the body. So micronutrients are essential when it comes to health, gut health, skin health, organ health, overall wellness. Tracking, we kind of covered tracking a little bit. Just make sure it's essential that you know what you're consuming. I recommend if you don't have a food scale, get a food scale, because eyeing things out does not work extremely well. In fact, a lot of times we underestimate what we're consuming. And that could be a reason why you're not seeing the progress that you're looking for. So a food scale and a tracker of some sort, just to be accountable. Or if you have a specific meal plan that everything is dialed in, follow the plan. Don't deviate. Consult with your coach. They will make sure that you stay on track. Common myths and misconceptions. You don't need a ton of protein. but you really need to make sure you have a minimal amount of protein to build that muscle you're looking for. You should not do crash diets. Do something that you can adhere to long term, something that's fun. Try to make sure it's simple for you to prepare. So bulk meal prepping is excellent because it gets rid of temptation and makes sure that everything is prepared, so that way you're not making a rash decision when you don't have preparation in place. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that covers a lot of what we're going to talk about. Give me 1 second to go through my notes to see if there's anything that we're missing. If you guys have any questions, please leave us some comments. Make sure if there's anything that we didn't discuss that you have a question on, if we are able to answer those questions, we definitely will. I think that's pretty much it. Specifically with the macro tracking, the tracking helps you identify your ratios to align with your changing needs as the body changes. It helps you identify potential deficiencies that you may be experiencing or excesses in your diet, so you can make necessary changes for your optimal nutrition. Essentially, again, having accountability is really key. So if you have everything laid out, you know what to change, when to change it, how to change it. And it's really simple once you have the systems in place, and that's what we're here for. So I wish you guys nothing but continued success. I hope you learned a lot today. And again, my name is Coach Lucas. Looking forward to talking to you guys soon.